Welcome to Supply Chain Next with your host, Richard Donaldson. Join us as we explore the ongoing evolution of supply chain, from the challenges professionals face every day to the ongoing digital transformation of the entire value network.
And good morning. Welcome to another episode of Supply Chain Next. And I am thrilled here today to have a kind of a slightly different format where we've got a couple of people representing one of the more unique firms that I've run into, which is the Pesti marketing firm. And in this sense and I'm going to let them tell their story, but Charlie and Priyanka here this morning, are partners in a marketing PR firm focused on supply chain. And in that sense, I'm not sure I've seen anything like that. And so I'm going to kind of welcome Charlie and Priyanka to the show. Can't wait to hear you guys' story. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Richard. Nice to be here.
Thanks for having us, Richard. Good morning.
Good morning. And let me also start and just say, because again, one of the powers of this show, and even you guys sort of show this right away, where are you guys, today? Because Priyanka, I think you are in India, if I remember. Whereabouts in India?
That's right, Richard. I'm in a place called Kashmir, in the north of India.
Right on. Okay. And then Charlie, we were talking earlier today. It's like you all of 36 hours ago were in Budapest, and now you're in the East Coast, I think.
Yeah. I'm finally back in Philadelphia.
Oh, right on. Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you guys for coming in. And I'm in Arizona, so again, we're kind of representing the world here, which is kind of fun. But let me start off right off the bat. I'm going to kick it to you, Charlie.
Yep.
Kind of the origin story. I think I would love to hear a little bit about 2015, if I've got this right, that's when Shree Pesti, the firm was born. But What in the world were you thinking?
I know, right?
Starting a supply chain marketing PR firm back in 2015. Yeah. What in God's name was going on?
I asked the same question to myself. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so the story actually started back in 2009. A German technology company, logistics technology company, hired me to set up the business for them in Central and Eastern Europe. And after less than a year, actually they transferred me to the UK to set up the business for them in the UK and help they already had a small establishment in the UK, but they moved me to the UK to strengthen and set up the business for them. And after 3 years, they sold part of the company to an American private equity firm, and they came up with the big idea moving a business to the US and Asia. And they hired someone to set up the business in Singapore, and they moved me to the US to set up the business for them in the US. That was in 2012, and in 2014, they wanted to move us again, the family, and then we decided we didn't want to be part of any more moving, because even before I joined them, we had moved between the UK and Hungary a couple of times for another company. So my family said, no, thank you very much. That was enough of moving. So figure something out and make sure that we stay here. So then we parted ways. And given my background and all the experience I had in the logistics and supply chain industries and technology specifically, I wanted to build my own company. Why not, right? And I secured funds. I spent and invested lots of time and effort and money into the business, but it's probably vast majority of early stage startups, it just went bust. So after a year, I ran out of financial fundings, and I had to decide to shut it down and do something else. we can go back to that point because I learned a lot from that failure. We can talk about it later, but just to answer your original question, based on all the connections I made in Europe, in the US, and pretty much all over the globe, industry thought leaders, journalists, media outlets, and businesses, it was just a natural transition from doing my own business to helping others. I thought that if I did it, if I could do it for myself to a certain degree, I believe that I could help others as well. I could share my successes. I could share my connections. I could share my thoughts and experience on failures. And probably that's the most efficient way of learning things. So then I started reaching out to contacts and businesses I worked with, and I said, hey, I could help you with a couple of things like content creation, can help you with marketing and public relations. I can help you even generating leads. And that was the foundation of the business back in 2015, 2016. And that's how I started on my own. And Priyanka was one of the, I think you were back the editor at one of the industry media outlets, right, Priyanka? And we started working together. And I said, hey, why don't you want to join me on this journey? And she was, I wouldn't say brave enough, but crazy enough joining me, you know? Because even in my eyes, that was more than braveness. She needed to be a little crazy, joining nothing. Because back then, I had like 2 or 3 clients, small clients, relatively speaking, small clients, at least the businesses, and the services I provided was relatively small. But I convinced her, and we've been working together ever since then. And so this is the foundation of the business. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump in on that one, and because you swung it over, but Priyanka, I think Charlie's being a little bit self-effacing here. I'm already getting a sense, and it might be the jet lag. He's a little bit understated. But let me ask you, because you're going to have a different perspective on his origin story. What were you thinking?
No, we are getting into the
when this crazy guy from Hungary, right, who's now displaced the United States, who just said, all right, I'm done with this startup thing. I'm going to go do marketing and PR. What were you thinking? Back in 2015, 2016, and you're in India this whole time. What were you up to, and how did you run across Charlie, and what attracted you to this at that time?
That's a very interesting question, Richard, and there are a lot of there are a lot of factors that came into play here. Firstly, I started off as a journalist in the maritime industry, so I realized pretty early that I was more interested or attracted to technology stories. So I would do those as features. I would take a lot of trouble to interview people in the technology space. And as you would imagine, in those days, the maritime industry wasn't really embracing technology. So they were few and far between. And then Charlie would send me very interesting stories to write up on technology such as blockchain, things that I had to research about, things that really interested me. And when we started talking, he had this vision and he had insight into the industry, which I thought was very exciting. I saw from my experience that the industry did require people to tell stories, people to, a deep understanding, because when there was this influx of technology, a lot of these people were hardcore techies. They would talk product They would talk technical things that you couldn't really translate to a market, of people that were interested in your solutions. So we had to intervene, and we had to tell them the right way to craft their messaging, to tell their stories, how they can reach their audience. And I thought, like he said, I thought it was very brave. I thought it was very exciting. And I also loved the fact that I had free hands. Working with Charlie is he doesn't micromanage. He doesn't breathe down your throat. He says, okay, you have an idea, do it, which was scary at first, but then it led to very interesting verticals that we formed within the company and were able to really today offer an end-to-end solution, whether it's PR, it's marketing, it's social, it's the technical back-end stuff like SEO and Google and all that. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. And I think, and I'm going to come back to both you guys here with sort of broadening the question a little bit. I'm going to come back to Charlie here, which is, and Charlie, I want to go back to, pre-2015, pre the founding of the marketing PR firm, you were engaged in a startup focused on a supply chain solution. So I don't want to overlook that. I'm curious as to what that was. But then the question inherent in there is, through the experience and the failure, and as an entrepreneur, trust me, more failures probably than successes. That's just the norm. And we need to talk about them, and that's how you should learn, right? Exactly. Even as a product person, I like to tell people the feedback I'm looking for is not what's working, it's what's not working, because I'd rather fix that, the failures, right? But so when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, all right, we're kindred spirits there. But my question is, buried in here is, through trying to develop and launch a startup in the supply chain space, was it that kind of lesson that you found? And Priyanka was talking about this, that, you're dealing with such a big vertical that was so resistant to technology or resistant to change in some way, shape, or form, that you had to learn how to speak to that vertical almost differently than you did to, say, a marketing team or a sales team or a finance team. Like, through your experience and launch of your startup, was that, with those elements, what cascaded into you launching a marketing PR firm that could tell stories about technology that's kind of trying to get into supply chain? Or what was the startup experience that gave birth to marketing and PR for you? I mean, what did you learn during that process?
I would say that my thoughts about and around technology in the logistics and supply chain space roots back to even early 2000s or mid 2003, 2005. I used to work for a traditional freight forwarding company, and even before that, for a traditional trucking company. And what I thought was that technology needed to play a much bigger role in the industry than it was back at that time. And I wanted to find a technology company in this space and to join them and learn what it is about and how it potentially could help the industry moving forward, because I believe that it was inevitable that the technology would break into the industry. It was just a matter of time. And I'm very grateful for being able to join the company, this German company, Transporion, back then, because that was, I can say that I used it as a springboard, because I knew nothing about technology in the space other than Excel spreadsheets, fax machines, phone calls, and I'm very grateful for them to taking me on board and letting me into that world. And then when I started focusing more on technology in the industry, but it's easy to say, and we can hear that so many over and over again, and the industry is reluctant on adopting technology in the space, which is true, but probably not more than any other industry, or because we as individuals are reluctant accepting anything new, right? Especially when it comes to a traditional old industries like logistics or supply chain. And I would say that it's just not different than any other industry.
Yeah, well, so now I'm going to flip it forward a little bit, though. Then,
yeah.
So with that, now looking kind of experiences. So now go from 2015 to kind of where we are now, and it's going to be a question for both of you guys. I'm going to start with you, Charlie. Here is, as the firm, well, first of all, you were about 6 years ahead of the tsunami that we now see at supply chain, right? It was sort of coming, it was building around 2015, and ironically, I was just starting Requus, actually, just past that, or actually a couple years past that. I was in the middle of supply chain, but you kind of had this, how should I say it, this forming going on. But in the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen, you were at the right place at the right time, whether you predicted it or not. Looking back, you made a great choice, right? At the time, I'm with you. Like, chance favors the prepared, right? Timing sometimes is out of our control. We just happen to be, we put ourselves in the right place. You catch the wave, you have a great, you're in the pipeline. But now looking back on it, we really have seen, and you've been at the forefront of some of these changes, right? I mean, technology, supply chain is all the rage. It is literally at the forefront of just about everything. You are seeing now supply chain leaders being tapped to run companies. I mean, supply chain is the in thing. It's the new black. It's everything, right? But it didn't happen overnight. So reflect a little bit on 2015 till now and what you've seen and how the firm itself has grown as sort of a proxy for everything that's going on in technology adoption in supply chain. Because you're right there. You're telling these stories. You've seen it. What's been going on? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. The industry has been developing, and more companies pop up over and over again. Over the time. And what we see is that actually we do not need to go after companies to get business. We are kind of fortunate enough, I can say, that businesses come to us for help. Right? So, and that, I think, that shows the volume of business and the volume of interest in the industry, in the space. That there's no shortage of new ideas, new technologies, new visionaries in the supply chain industry, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, and I encourage every genius is out there who's never heard about supply chain and logistics before. Join us. We need you.
And so we'll keep going on that, and let me kind of double click on that for a second, and I'm going to shift to Priyanka for here, and also kind of again revisit that question, which is, as Charlie's saying quite appropriately, it's sort of like you've got these sort of in the bench technologists. Let's look at Elon Musk, right? Yeah. Like him or dislike him, the guy has changed the world when it comes literally. When it comes to cars, when it comes to space travel, when it comes to payments, when he co-founded PayPal. But kind of like you're saying, Charlie, that there's, technology requires technologists to sort of come in and adapt for the different verticals and applications, whether it's medical, whether it's space flight, whether it's cars, or in our case, supply chain. But the question still stands that, as you are in the middle of telling the story of this kind of change and transformation, right? And Priyanka, what have you seen kind of evolve over the last 4 or 5 years where, the dialogue has changed, the temperaments change, the companies that are coming in that are looking to get into the space? Why do they need a marketing PR firm to tell the story in the first place, right? Over these last 4 or 5 years? And what have you been telling them? Like, what did you have to translate for supply chain people? Like, what was the disconnect? And then what have you kind of seen in that, filling that disconnect for everybody? Because that's the void you guys fill. So Priyanka, how have you seen that evolve over the last 4 or 5 years?
I think the biggest thing that we've had to do, Richard, is give our customers confidence, that they're telling their stories appropriately. We had to bring them out of their caves and say, hey, speak to your audience, let people know who you are, bring your customers, we'll help you. We'll help you tell the story together. Let's not talk about the tech per se. Let's talk about the problems you're solving. Let's talk about the value you're bringing to people. People were working in silos. People were not collaborating. I think what we've been able to do is generate some great content and have some great conversations around problems. Why should you invest in this technology? What does it do for your business? How does it bring you that ROI? And give them the confidence to come forward and say that, because they've been, what we've seen is people were in the background. They didn't want to come forward. They didn't want to bring their customers. Customers didn't want to engage with their technology providers. They're always afraid to lend their brand name. But I think that attitude has changed, and in a big way, where now we have requests from customers within, clients, companies. We have different people coming forward. Everyone wants to come forward now and be on a podcast or be on a round table or even speak to the media. I think that attitude changed, and there's this need for collaboration, need to understand what peers and even competitors are doing and saying. And so I see people engaging with this content a lot more now than they used to.
100%. And then I'm going to come back to Charlie here in this one. So within the context of the content, right? And the question is, okay, if I've got a technology and I'm trying to sell this to, first of all, we're dealing with big B to big B. So let's start there, right? This is not a consumer oriented play. We're not dealing with emotions. We're dealing with business people. So you got to put your LinkedIn hat on, not your Facebook hat, right? And then as I look at the enterprise and I begin to subdivide the enterprise, who I'm targeting, it could be finance, it could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be HR. But in this case, we're talking about supply chain. And I guess my question to you, Charlie, is I think there's a little bit inherent, because you guys have specialized in supply chain marketing and PR. There's a slightly different way to talk to the supply chain organization that's sort of evolved, and Priyanka was kind of touching on it, that people didn't get right away, right? Like if you were selling to the HR group a technology solution, it's not the same way you would package it if you were selling the supply chain solution, because they were a bit resistant initially. That's changed. I think they've grown to realize they have to adopt technology. But my question again, Charlie, like there are some things you guys have seen and uncovered and learned in how to talk to supply chain people that is somewhat unique.
This is an excellent question, Richard, because we all understand the difference between B2C and B2B marketing or businesses. But one thing that we have to remember is that even if it's a B2B relationship, at the end of the day, there's an individual or group of individuals who will make a decision, right? So, and from that point on, it's not a B2B thing anymore, right? So you have to talk to the right people, and you have to convince the people, the person, the decision maker on the other side about the benefits of your product, about the benefits of your services. So I think it's critical for businesses to understand that okay, you are in the B2B space, but at the end of the day, you have to convince an individual or group of individuals. And the other thing is that they will make a decision on their personal feelings, on their personal opinions, about their personal preferences, right? But still, it's he or she is an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And let me again, kind of, I'm going to triple click on this one because I think you're about to touch on it. So help me to understand. So I'm going to put the context. So I'm a prototypical client for you guys, like a technology, let's just say a technology solution, right?
Yeah.
And I see that supply chain is a giant opportunity for me, right? Yep. And I think my solution meets the supply chain problems. So first and foremost, how do you evaluate a potential client who wants to sell into the supply chain space and help them to uncover what their value proposition is? Because they may come to you and say, I want to sell the supply chain because I've got a really cool technology. Okay, well, that's probably not going to go anywhere because everyone says they have a great technology, but what specifically are you addressing in the supply chain organization's needs, right? Back to your kind of point about what do these people really need, right? What are they really looking for, right? Everyone in supply chain is looking for technology, but what specifically, right? So how do you help first of all, how do you evaluate a client and help them find out what their real value proposition is, and then shift it so that it is actually something that is you articulate for supply chain people that works better?
So technically you answered your own question. Right? So this is not about you as a new technology provider in this space. It's not about you. It's not about your product. It's not about your services. It is about your client, about your prospect. You need to understand what their problems and difficulties and challenges are, and translate your solution to their problem. Because the only way to get on board is if you solve the problem and challenges what they face on a day-to-day basis. And that challenge could be different from one company to the other. Even if the solution can be the same, but the challenge can be different, and different challenges could be solved with pretty much the same solution. But first and foremost, you have to understand your clients, your prospect. Bluntly put, shut up, sit down, listen what the problems and challenges are, and then try to solve their problems and challenges with your solution.
Yep. That makes sense. Priyanka, I know you're ready. I can see you chomping to come in because I was ready to kind of flip over to you, but I'm going to let you come in and answer on that one, but let me refine it just a little bit. So within that,
sorry for my language.
Oh, no. You're spot on. Honestly, it's a safe space. Whatever you want to call it, jump in, say it all. But Priyanka, and I think Charlie's kind of was steering this direction, which is, what are these things that supply chain organizations are looking for, right? So if I'm like, again, imagine now you're kind of on stage. And I got a bunch of supply chain technology companies coming in going, oh my God, Priyanka, how do I speak to this vertical? What are they looking for? What would you tell them? What are the things that you would help them to just start in that approach, right? Go ahead. Yeah.
The thing is, Richard, very often they don't know what they want, to be very honest. They come to us and say, we want...
You're talking about the supply chain people don't know what they want, right? Yeah, so they come in and they're just like, oh my God, I need help. And you're like, okay, what do you need help with? It's like, I don't know. I just need help.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So just getting into the operational level here, and, we have an intensive discovery process with them, right? That includes, SMEs from our team that will vet the solution, that will deep dive into it, go through their demos, go through their sales cycles, look at success that they found. We also tend to bring in the media on some of these during these discovery phases. We'll have journalists get in and call them out on their BS. Because like I said, every technology solution provider thinks that they've changed the world, which they may have, but not completely and not for everyone. We want to hone in, or we want to, filter into the market, the decision makers, like Charlie said. And that also advises us or tells us on how we're creating content. So there are different people who are vetting or who are looking for solutions, and then there are the decision makers. So our process also reflects that. We want to create blogs. We want to give, some kind of information about the solution to people who are looking for it actively. And then to the decision makers, we want to give that, meaty white paper wherein they'll be able to study it and be close to closing the deal. So oftentimes,
let me jump in on that one, Priyanka. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't want you to fly over this, because I think you also touched on something that's really important. You said white paper, right? And the reason I picked on that is because, again, this is sort of inherent in the question is, I'm not marketing razor blades, or a newfangled drink, but I have to take a different approach through white papers, thought leadership, subject matter expertise that is a little bit more how B2B works, right? It's about educating the prospects, not necessarily selling to them, right? And right. So I think there was in there, but let you expand on that.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Richard, because this is not a group of people that can see something and immediately understand what it will do for them, for their organization. So you have to give them little at a time. You have to be visible to them. That comes into the thought leader content, whether, we put our clients on webinars, whether we get interviews for them, live TV, so that people gain confidence in the leadership. And then that influences their decision to buy. So it's different strategies that we have to implement. Sometimes it's doing market research, and providing insights to the industry that would make a prospect turn around and say, hey, okay, these people know what they're talking about. They're speaking to the right people. They're asking the right questions. And then again, it's on a global scale. So a white paper that works very well in the US is not going to work in Europe. They have a different form of content. They have a different way to engage their audience. So really, we take a lot of time to understand our customers, our clients. We take time to understand which direction their business is going, how they're expanding, in which regions, and then we create opportunities for them. And again, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon. It takes time, and there are different elements that we have to bring into it. From a blog to a white paper to maybe a roundtable events, all to bring the correct value.
Well, I think also what I'm hearing you say too is there's, first and foremost, and again, we're kind of at a high level here, really contrasting a little bit between B2C and B2B, right? And in B2B, and even more specifically when you get into supply chain, thought leadership, subject matter expertise are a little bit more the drivers behind a marketing strategy or implementation execution strategy, if you will. But then also consistency, right? It's about being out there with, now doesn't mean you're saying like, you're giving pearls of wisdom every time you speak, but you're out there consistently and you're visible, because one of the things, that inherent in what you're saying, and I'm hearing you say, is that, beyond the value proposition of your product, the person who's making the choice oftentimes is making a choice on what's the least risky solution to me as a business person, right?
Exactly.
Right. That's their emotional kind of thing, because it's a business choice. And in a business choice, I'm choosing something to help my business, be more profitable, make more money. And more specifically, I don't want to lose my job. Right. And that's one of the key differentiators from B2C and B2B is anybody who makes a purchasing decision, the ultimate consequence, negative consequence of their decision is they get fired.
Yep.
And that doesn't happen in consumer land, right? I can buy a pair of jeans. I'm not going to get fired. Maybe they don't fit right, but Okay, so what? What I mean? Like
maybe by your wife.
Yeah. So, but it's a much different. I mean, like fundamentally, different. You are trying to convince someone to make a decision where the consequence can mean they lose their job.
Yep.
And that's that is philosophically, that is so different from B to C. And if you're not even there in the beginning, then you're kind of missing the whole point. So Charlie, I'm going to swing back to you and kind of expand on that. But there's a specific also inside of this, which is historically, and this is one of the things I've observed, is that technology, and one of the reasons why I even got into the game, is that supply chain never had its own technology solutions. It was always someone else's solution. So for example, supply chain had to use a finance solution we all know as SAP and somehow try to make that a supply chain solution. Well, it never was a supply chain solution. It was always a finance solution, right? Yeah. And then we've seen other things like, a strict procurement solution, because of course, RFPs and RFQs have been around forever. So, the procurement world has had a focus, or even trucking and logistics has had a focus, right? Where solutions have been very tailored to just an RFX kind of world or a shipping logistics world. But there's never again been a supply chain solution, right? Or supply chain technology. So my question in that, Charlie, is what does it even mean to be a supply chain technology today versus historically it was either kind of a jerry-rigged finance solution or it was a procurement solution? We have this whole new emerging space of supply chain solutions. What does that even mean?
Yeah, supply chain solution could mean different things for different people. If you think about supply chain as a whole, it's a global challenge, right? And I do not believe that there will be one company on planet Earth who would be able to provide the supply chain solution for everybody, because there's so many stakeholders in the chain that there's no way that you have the solution for every one of them. So, in my view, there always will be different providers, different solutions, different technologies in the space. So there always be a need for collaboration, cooperation, integrations to make things work.
Are there, well, absolutely. And I think that's, again, open, collaborative is kind of also an outcome of even the information age, right? I mean, closed source software versus open source software, where we kind of know who won that, battle. And everything that we see today is a more open, collaborative versus the, age-old industrial age kind of concept of kill or be killed, and everything is a, finite amount of resources. And I gotta, if I don't get it, someone else will, zero-sum gain, yada, yada, yada. That's giving way now to wait a minute. I can actually collaborate with all of my quote unquote competitors, and the world's so big with now 8 billion people, there's enough for it to go around, right? And I can't do it for everybody. I mean, there's just no way, right?
You have to think about supply chain solution as a hot dog, right? Supply chain technology as a hot dog. The hot dog bun is nice, tastes good. You can have it. You have a bratwurst. You can have it. It tastes good. It's okay. You can have mustard. It's okay. Tastes good. You can eat it. Ketchup, whatever. You name it. But if you put these things together, then you have the damn hot dog, and that tastes good. And that's how I see supply chain technology. And the hot dog is the supply chain technology, but there are different elements of the hot dog, and that collaboration, that group makes the ultimate experience what you need and what we're looking for.
Agreed, and I think it's a great way to kind of it's some ingredients. When you put them, the ingredients by themselves are their own things, but when you put them together, you have this fantastic creation, right? And it's a recipe that goes into it. Well, now let me shift a little bit and come back to you, Priyanka, which is now here we are today. We're kind of coming out of this, this whatever we call this last few years, this lunatic last few years that's caused Charlie to spend 36 hours traveling because now that's unfrozen. People are just going, they're almost waking up going, I don't even know what the hell happened these last couple of years. It's like, I just came out of the club and I'm like, Jesus, what happened here? Holy Christ. It's so, but here we are, where supply chain is front and center. You guys are in the middle of telling the stories for all these supply chain technologies coming. But now, there's some things that are starting to emerge that supply chain is really kind of now rooted and taking hold. And we're seeing some things like circularity starting to come in, right? Like some of these, now is supply chain technology adoption and asset visibility and, digital twins. What are some of the trends that you are seeing from your perspective within supply chain looking forward that are kind of the 1, 2, 3 things that any technology startup coming into supply chain should be thinking about, right? Relative to supply chain. What are the big kind of mega trends that you're seeing, right, in the story arc of supply chain and digitization kind of looking forward?
Yeah, great question, Richard. People want things that are going to make their lives easier, right? They don't want to understand these big buzzwords like big data and IoT and artificial.
That doesn't mean anything to anybody. My God, it's like buzzword bingo. Like you just kind of your eyes roll over. I'm like, I don't even know what that means anymore. Some of this stuff, right?
Exactly. They want simple, easy to use solutions. You do the hard work, you give it to us, you show us how it's going to help us, and we'll do it. That's one thing. The other thing is sustainability. People want to make sure that they're conscious of what they're doing, how their solution is impacting the environment, who the leadership is. They want to make sure that they're dealing with the right people. So these are things that people are becoming very conscious of. And I think that's good because it allows for a lot of accountability. Not something that pops up and that's very intensive or, has a huge carbon footprint. So there's this huge measure to manage debate that's on right now, which is going to be very interesting. And like Charlie said, there's a lot of collaboration. People are not afraid. One company can be using multiple technology solution providers, and that means that they have to work together. And just yesterday I saw a product, from one of our customers that helps manage all these different technology providers and shows, which one is down and when. And so that means that you have to work together. You've got a great solution, but so does he and so does she. And let's come together and get that, bang for our buck from there.
Gotcha. Well, I'm gonna flip it back around, Charlie, the same, because I know you're chomping at the bit on that one. But similar question, like, what are you seeing? What are the mega trends?
I'd like to take this opportunity and call fellow supply chain maniacs and technology providers on sustainability. It's a huge thing. I must tell that it is still a hard sell. I'm glad, and we see more and more companies, businesses, especially larger ones, to not only to talk about it, but to do something about it. But still, it is a hard sell.
What is it? Let me ask you a question on that one, because this is going to go. I'm going to touch on your storytelling here for a second, and I'm going to go back to and kind of validate Priyanka's buzzword bingo here. Sustainability is so overused to me. I'll be controversial. To me, it's become a buzzword. I don't even know what sustainability means anymore. And I'm kind of at the same mindset where I'm like, okay, right. The minute I hear you say sustainability, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, what are we talking about? What specifically are you trying to get to? Because I can be sustainable in my materials. I can be sustainable in my recycling and my manufacturing. So how do you expand on what sustainability actually should mean?
I do not believe that I'm the person to say what sustainability mean for individual businesses. But what I would say is that the smallest and the smallest step you can make towards a greener future, to a more sustainable future, you have to do it. And don't try to solve the sustainability issue overnight, because you will not be able to. But you have to do something about it. And even the smallest step, just like, I don't know, removing plastic caps from your office, or I don't know, even the smallest thing could make a big difference later on. What I wanted to say was really that it's difficult, at least today, it's difficult to put an ROI on a sustainability movement or a campaign or anything. Do not expect thousands of clicks or thousands of views on any sustainability related project today. That's why I'm saying that it is a hard sell. But God bless you.
Yeah, right.
You have to do it. Keep pushing for it. Keep pushing for it.
Well, let me, and I'll come back to you, Priyanka. And this is, and I guess I'll reveal my bias here a little bit, because I've written about this a little bit, thought about it. But I think sustainability, and again, we hear a lot of, and this has been going on for a long time, whether it's global warming, whether it's decarbonization, whether it's water reuse, there's just a bunch of different areas where sustainability can come in. And again, it's such a such a big term, it loses specificity, and therefore it's hard to kind of do anything with it, right? Without saying, well, what do you mean by that? However, I do think there is a theme here. And the question to you, Priyanka, is circularity, right? And this is where I think circularity and sustainability is sort of the meta thing, because there's a lot of ways to be sustainable. But circularity, when I look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, when I look at some of the Circle Group out of the Netherlands, when I look at, the fact that we're 8% circular today, based on the data that's available on the 105 gigatons of materials that are coming out of the earth and being moved around and whatever. But that's starting to emerge to me as sort of a meta trend, where it's tangible, it's real. And really what are we talking about is focusing on kind of essentially recycling, reuse. Recycling is a piece of it, but circularity seems to be a theme that's starting to emerge. How do you see that now in the context of the question of around sustainability and making it, making solutions practical around that? Is circularity starting to emerge a little bit more clearly in the area of sustainability, or how do you view that?
Richard, there are certain customers of ours that practice that and advocate that, and even created best practices, on how to reuse some of their technology elements or some of their solutions. But I would say it's still in its very nascent stages. It's not. I'm sure that if people can envision it, if people can see how that works, if people can create use cases and show the impact that will have, it'll definitely pick up. It's there in parts, but it's still in its very nascent stages from what we see. It's not very deeply thought of.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think there's a lot. I think you're absolutely right. There's still a lot of ambiguity, but things are kind of starting to crystallize, right, as they do. For example, when you guys started the firm 6 or 7 years ago, technology and supply chain was still kind of vague. What the hell did that mean? That's gotten a lot more refined over the last 6 or 7 years. So like circularity is sort of an inevitable conclusion. I think we'll get there, but it may take 10 or 15 years, right? It's a big theme, but it's, we're still kind of trying to figure out what that means. So let me come back a little bit. And also Charlie kind of, and again, with the firm and what you guys are doing, but you guys have been growing again, concurrently and parallel with everything going on in supply chain. How do you see your firm and the story around supply chain and technology? Just, look forward a few years. You guys are growing. It's international. It's everything. What do you see piloting, not only your firm, but just where things are going over the next few years? Like what are your clients doing? How are you advising them? How are you getting them prepared for, because it's here. I mean, if you're in supply chain and you're in supply chain technology, it's like one of the hottest sectors you can be in, period. Right.
Yep.
You know, how are you helping people kind of, take advantage of that right now?
Yeah. One of the positives that came out of this pandemia and this 2 years of nightmare was that supply chain has become and hit the mainstream media and the headlines, and that's been helping the industry tremendously. Even everyday people realize and kind of have a bit of insight into supply chain, and that will help. That will help the industry tremendously. Let me circle back to one of my early points I made today, was that we want and we need new faces, new geniuses, fresh, young talent in the industry to move it forward. And that's how I can see the next 5, 10, 15 more years, that more and more young visionaries will join the space and help the incumbents, help new businesses to grow and do more. And just to link it back to your point on sustainability and the circular economy, that will be a part of it, and the supply chain will do much more and can do much more for these problems and challenges in the future. So bright future ahead. Bright future ahead.
And attract all the people. I mean, that's another thing that I think, and again, if I'm looking at, in the industries, that are looking to attract people, I mean, this is now we're in the education side. We're in, again, this is a marketing PR thing. How do you make supply chain sexy? Right. So if I'm in college, right, and I'm looking at all the things I can do in my career, I don't remember even my college, anyone even talking about supply chain. Granted, that was, eons ago, but, in today's, marketing, sales, MBA, is there a supply chain where people are lining up to go be a part of that, right? The same way they used to want to be an investment banker, or they wanted to be, the head of marketing or something like that. Like, chief supply chain officers need to come to the forefront. People need to see the stories of people like Tim Cook, right? So as a contrast to Steve Jobs, Tim Cook is a supply chain person. And again, he's a supply chain person. And he's an absolute supply chain person, right? And he's running the company. Now, you can critique positive and negative, but you can't deny that a supply chain practitioner is running the company and, running in certain ways. And a lot of people are saying, I need this supply chain type perspective to run companies. And in fact, I was just thinking, I don't know if you know, but Radu Palmariu, right? The recruiter, out of Singapore. I think, Charlie, this goes, I think Radu is Romanian. Charlie, you're Hungarian. So all of a sudden I'm starting to go, wait a minute, I'm connecting dots here. There's something about Eastern Europe and supply chain people, right? And they're the ones that are running the world right now. What the hell's going on? I don't know what goes on Richard, over there.
And this is one of the beauties of the industry, that it's so international. It's so global, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, and I can say that this is one of the most interesting points about the industry, that it's so different. It's so diverse. It's so many people, so many different places. I moved around the globe for a few years. I lived in 5 or 6 countries on 2 different continents. And one thing that I learned was that you can speak a language at whatever level, that's one thing. But understanding the people is a completely different story. And there's a huge gap between the two, right? And supply chain is one of the things that can bridge this gap and these gaps. Right? We have to be grateful having a supply chain and on top of people's minds today, because that will just make more connections and yeah, just
absolutely.
So
well, evidence by the call. Look at this. Here we are. We got Pennsylvania, Arizona, India. Exactly. I mean, it's already international. And so, and Priyanka, and I think that's a good. And let me only be conscious of time too. Here we're kind of winding down, but Priyanka, as you think about that, and I think Charlie brings up some good points. Like, if you're thinking about people who are getting into supply chain now, and let's focus on kind of the up and comers, like how are you helping them and advising? I'm sure you run into people all the time. Like, I mean, I every time I run into someone who's in college, I'm like, oh my God, are you thinking about supply chain? Just to kind of test the waters. How do you speak to people today who are thinking about even embarking on a career, getting into supply chain? Like, I mean, given your experiences, I mean, how are you helping kind of tell that story and getting people excited about supply chain?
Yeah. That's very interesting, Richard, because I remember it was a couple of weeks ago where, I asked one of these youngsters, a college goer, I said, what do you think a person in supply chain does? And he said, it's probably someone, in a 9-to-5 job, sitting behind a computer, just typing away all day. And you were absolutely right when you said that it's a kind of content that we're putting out, right? I was recently on a panel about women in the supply chain and what we can do to attract more women into the space, because it requires a lot of multitasking. It requires a lot of stress management, and I think these are skills that women have naturally. These are things that come naturally to women. So I said, if we keep saying that the supply chain is an industry that's 24/7, it's stressful, it's very technical, it's not sexy. I mean, no one wants to touch that with a stick, right? So it's about how we project the industry to youngsters. So we have this within the organization. We have one of our values, I would say, is bring your crazy ideas. Bring them. It might be the craziest idea on the planet, but we need those kind of ideas. We need, fresh perspectives. We need outsiders. We need you to tell us how to make this industry sexy, because we all love working in it. I mean, it is something that we would never give up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So even with the youngsters in our team, like our digital marketing team, they come up with the craziest ideas and we love them. We just think about how we're going to execute these. So I think that's where the appeal will lie, in how we project this industry and, how we talk about the interesting things that happen. Just think about how creative you have to be for a single shipment in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. I think you also said that, Charlie, I'm going to kind of, let you close out here a little bit. But it's kind of the same thing, like what, and I think Priyanka touches on so many different things there, as far as, getting people in to think differently and kind of looking forward. And I'll tease you a little bit with this leading question, which is, I start to connect, like, supply chain is really the only part of the businesses in aggregate that touches every human being.
Yeah.
Universally. And Brian, and I still link this from Brian over at Refashion Ventures and Lisa Morales, because he says, the supply chain connects everyone. It's the central nervous system that literally interlocks. Every human being is either a user of the supply chain or a producer on the supply chain, or oftentimes both. So to get things kind of sexy, I started looking at actually the space race. And here's where things get crazy is if I look at Chris Kemp, who's the CEO of a company called Astra, and everyone knows SpaceX and Elon, but there's all these other rocket companies showing up. Chris Kemp says, I'm not a rocket company. I'm actually a supply chain company. And he's a software guy, by the way. So he's another one of these innovators coming in and changing the world, just like Elon changing SpaceX. But I start legitimately thinking about that. I mean, today when I got on before you guys, I was reading about, South Korea going through SpaceX, putting something on the moon. I mean, we're literally developing the early frameworks of our space-based bidirectional supply chain, because we're going to have to deliver supplies to people going to space, and eventually we're going to be pulling supplies back. So if you want me to make super sexy and relevant and into perpetuity what supply chain is, well, supply chain not only interlocks everyone on this planet, it will interlock every human being that goes forth into space, right? How do you want to play with that one? That's pretty freaking cool as far as I'm concerned. How do you see that, Charlie? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about it. How big and the supply chain is, and the endless opportunities within the supply chain. Think about this: there are only two the industries that can make or break the world. One is the supply chain, and the second one is finance. That's it. That will give you a perspective how big the opportunity is within supply chain. Whether you are a rocket scientist or a space explorer or investment banker or anything, right? So the opportunities are endless, and the opportunities are for young individuals, talented individuals to make things better.
100%. And it's interesting you say that, because and I agree with you. And here's my little bit of my biased dig against the finance world. And by the way, I started my career as an investment banker, so I'm a reformed finance person, so I can tease them. Supply chain is even more fundamental than finance, because the supply chain existed before finance even existed.
Yeah. The
supply chain is the basket of goods that finance has tried to put a currency around. Right? So finance is literally an oil that's trying to grease the wheels of efficient supply chain.
Yeah.
So if I looked at the root DNA of everything that we consider to be commerce, supply chain started when human beings multiplied more than two people, because all of a sudden I had to connect everybody, right? That's food and substance and stuff like that. So it's sort of like you're dealing with the oxygen of almost the human condition, which is supply chain, right? Yeah, and I'm not sure people really fully understand how pervasive supply chain is and has to be for the human species to survive, right? Yeah. I mean, I look at ant colonies, and ants are just massive supply chain people, right? In nature, that's what they do. So you see it all. So anyways, I feel like we could go, and I'm looking at this, I'm going, an hour's just gone. That's what happens when these things get going. I feel like we could be doing this for the rest of the day. So I want to be conscious of your guys' time and everything else. And it's Friday morning. But this has been an amazing conversation. Any last words, Charlie? Any thoughts or anything you want to throw out there, just kind of, to kind of close things out?
Yeah, I just want to repeat myself. Young people, young individuals, young talents out there. We need you. The industry needs you. Join us. There are endless opportunities for you, for your family, for your friends.
Yeah, and awesome. And also, it's easy to find you guys. I mean, both of you are on LinkedIn. Oh, yeah. You got the Charlie Pesti, obviously the website. You guys are open to networking and everything. So, absolutely, reach out, anytime, anywhere kind of thing. Yeah. And Priyanka, it is
one more thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you have any wild or crazy idea, reach out to us. We love crazy ideas. We love crazy people. We want to hear about you. We want to hear your story.
Yeah. Awesome. And Priyanka, same. So just building on that a little bit, closing thoughts, parting thoughts, reach out to the people. What's up?
Yep. I think it's very exciting, very interesting times. Richard, we need deep content. We need, like Charlie said, there's tier one media now that thinks supply chain is cool. So we have so many stories to tell, so many different ways to tell them. We're excited about what's to come, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your guys' time, and have a happy Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you have any comments about this episode or topics on supply chain you'd like us to cover, you can reach us at supplychainnext@requis.com. And while you're at it, check out the Requis platform at supplychain.requis.com. Requis allows you to manage the full asset lifecycle in the cloud while collaborating with your entire value network to buy, manage, and sell your assets. Find out more at requis.com.